Hello everyone, welcome to Leading with Agility, the show that uses the world around us to explore how leadership can be inspired by agility. As always, I'm your regular host, Arif, and I'm joined by...
Myself, TK, someone that really enjoys the current British summer.
I think we're all enjoying our usual British summer, aren't we, TK? We talked about weather last time.
In our own ways, I guess.
Which is very British as it is, because we talk about the weather. So there you go. If you're a regular listener, then that's not news to you, I'm sure.
At all.
But it has been today a sunnier day than what it has been the last few days, where it was raining constantly. So nice to have the sun out. Anyway, wherever you are, we hope you're also having great weather.
Whatever it means for you, yes.
Yeah. Not the topic of today's conversation, but important to recognize great weather when it's there. What are we talking about today, TK? Well, this is an interesting time for Amazon warehouse workers, especially here in the UK, because they are in the midst of... Yes, they're in the midst of embarking on a historic round of voting to unionize, something that I think has been... difficult to achieve for Amazon workers globally for various reasons. We'll go into some of that. But I think we wanted to explore, TK, unionizing in more general or unions in more general in light of, I suppose, well, there's this now increasing growing demand from employees worldwide for fair, equal pay and treatment. And with world events and everything going constantly changing, and lots of volatility for various reasons, we thought we'd explore, what does it mean for leaders? How should leaders behave when faced with demands for unionization, as in Amazon's case, or just unions making demands of leaders in a more general sense? So that's what I thought we're going to be exploring today, TK.
It's a very good point. Yeah, no. I remember when I, pitched the topic, it's like, hey, look, Arif, the labor is in government, and obviously they draw the roots from, the labor movement. And it's interesting that, this is, I think, topical and timely. Amazon is just one of the examples, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, labor is currently in government now. There is an interesting... Okay, I'll come back to that one. But let just on that context point about Amazon, because that's the current news story. Post-pandemic, they experienced a massive boom of sales, customers, and all of that. And as you'd expect, people at home, they've got nothing
twiddling fingers on buying stuff. Yeah,
exactly, buying stuff and so on. So that just drove a huge sales increase. And then already you've got Jeff Bezos, who is a multi-billionaire. I mean, his his personal net worth grew by 70 billion during the first 12 months of the pandemic alone. I mean, that's a staggering amount of wealth that most of us could only dream of, whether we want that or not.
He worked hard, and he's providing a service that people want to buy. So there you go.
Well, yes, and then there's questions, of course, that his employees are asking of him and saying, well, are we paid and treated fairly enough, given how much we've put into generating that wealth for you?
They did, yeah.
Right? And so that's where workers in warehouses across the UK and actually the world began raising these challenges, and a lot of it down to difficult shift work. Long commutes and that kind of stuff. And there's a high staff turnover in this type of shift-based work, as you can imagine. And then the other wider context, not just on Amazon, but here in the UK, labour challenges post-Brexit, where you have lack of availability of workers anyway. You've got organisations squeezed, high inflation, high costs, therefore not passing on fair or high pay rises to staff and workers. And there's this growth of what's now called zero-hour contracts as well, TK, where essentially workers can be hired with no guarantees on employment in the long term and then let go when work dries up.
That's the definition.
And that is the case for many, especially in the so-called gig economy. And so... And just on that gig economy, sorry, this is a long point, but I just want to finish on the gig economy one. There have been various attempts to unionize amongst, for example, delivery riders and also Uber drivers, for example. I mean, there's been long disputes between them and, for example, Uber. Who I believe here in London, finally, there has been some movement with the GMB union trying to improve matters for Uber drivers, for example. But yeah, so there you go, TK. There's a lot that I've said there, but there's a huge context and backdrop to all of this, and it's only increasing.
Because, well, the labor movement and, these kinds of things, there's always, it comes from, unfortunately, a place of suffering that it was all based on in terms of, it didn't emerge because people just wanted to work together. It emerged that people that, work these jobs, essentially laborers, were exploited. And that's something I wanted to acknowledge. And maybe, it's actually a difficult one for me.
Okay.
Just because I remember a few years ago now in business school, the opinion about what to do with unions and how to deal with them was pretty one-sided. At least when I've learned about it, right? I've never been in a union. No. I actually have never worked in a company that had a union, at least, that I've had any practical interactions with. And I have to say, as I was thinking about this topic, that I'm speaking from the lack of experience and also being privileged as a person that I've never thought about the need for my rights as a worker to be represented. And, if people like me are in leadership positions, which there might not be as reflective as I am. They might have very little empathy towards workers, I would say. And this is where all of this comes about from, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good, no, thanks for being open and honest about it, TK. And you're not the only one. I can probably add to that. I've not been in a union myself. I have worked in one or two places where the union existed, but it was very much hidden from view, so to speak, and I never really interacted with them or had the need to interact with that union. So, like you, limited exposure. But as my own career's progressed, I've become more hyper aware of it, especially from the outside looking in terms of various industries where, like I mentioned, workers' rights are very obviously being reduced, curtailed, and workers aren't getting a fair deal. It's quite obvious, and this, I think, for me, that came about especially when this rise of this whole idea of 0 hours contracts, and then you saw it also more recently with P&O Ferries, for example.
Oh yeah, these guys. Oh my God.
So for those of you not from the UK, P&O Ferries, a ferry company, they run popular routes from the UK to abroad, and they decided on what's known as called a fire and rehire scheme. Essentially, it's a way of mass redundancy or cuts, but then you hire the same people back on poorer standard contracts, so almost like 0 hours. So it basically means that the staff have less rights, less employee rights, and they're at the behest of the employer as to whether they get work or not. It's quite a extreme way of employing staff in a way to manage your own costs, I think. I'm being polite about saying that.
Well, absolutely. And I think this is, 2020 something. But the interesting thing is, obviously, the labor movement comes from a place where the exploitation was even more ridiculous, I would say.
Yes.
So, that's still taking place in various forms. What I would say, though, is what's really interesting is really digging in and looking deep into our own views on employment and work, and our own views on, what would actually happen to us if we were, confronted with our wonderful crew starting a union. So these are interesting ones, right? It depends on your worldview, depends on so many things, but also I think it's a part of life, isn't it, right? As leaders, we need to deal with that.
And I think that's a really good point. There's probably a couple of things that come to mind, which is, as you said, it comes from that position of or place of exploitation, right? When workers feel they are being exploited or they feel their rights aren't being protected, then they want to, what's known in union parlance is collective bargaining. So they get together.
That's important too, yeah.
That's a key part of unionizing, is getting together and collectively bargaining for your rights and ensuring you have a fair say. Now, what's interesting on that, TK, is you say, as you said, that, how would you deal with it if you were confronted with it? If we were, for example, here at Humble, we're nowhere near that. But what's interesting is there has been a growing number of growing number of employees worldwide, here in the UK and also in the US, from the stats I was reading, who are showing greater interest in joining a union. Part of that is, as I said at the start, when you've got high inflation, high costs, worker pay not going up, workers' rights diminishing for other various reasons, all of that, and quality of life, all of that having an impact, and people saying, well, we need to figure out a way to protect ourselves. And one way is let's start a union, join a union, something like that. So there has been a growth. So the stats I was looking at through that, here in the UK, proportion of UK employees who are trade union members increased by a couple of 100,000. Not a huge number, but the trend has been a reduction in number of people who are part of a union over the years, and in the last year there has been a slight uptick. Similarly, in the US, there's been also a similar slight uptick in number of people interested or joining or wanting to be a part of a union. So there is a growing movement worldwide for better pay, rights, and all the rest of it. And there is a view that joining a union is a way to return that to the employee, so to speak. Yeah. So then what I want to get onto, I suppose, is it really starts from what environment are you creating, that the fact that there needs to be even this conversation where workers feel they need to join a union in order to protect themselves. I mean, just the fact that is happening tells me, or I believe anyway, from looking outside in, that there is something wrong with how you're operating your organization. And is that the wrong thing to say, TK?
I don't think it's the wrong thing to say. It's a thing to say. To be honest, Arif, the way I think about it is, it's clear that, I don't know if you would agree, that, the more inequality there is, let's maybe talk about income inequality or wealth inequality in a given culture, society, region, country, the more, people, laborers will see themselves being exploited because they're not getting a fair deal and unionize to bargain collectively. And I think, I haven't analyzed the statistics, but you wonderful listeners, you're free to do so and find the inequality index. I think it's been on the uptick, as you said, about Mr. Bezos. It might be a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, the numbers here in the UK was about close to 100,000 members, so the increase from the last year. For example, in the States, it was, I think, over 200,000, so nearly close to 250,000. What was interesting is in the States, there's also a ethnic minority discrepancy as well, which is of all racial groups, black workers have increased their unionization rates, whereas white workers have reduced it. That's a particular context.
An interesting one, yeah.
That is a fascinating one, which tells you maybe that, and I, from a UK context, what's interesting is where unsecure work tends to be the type of work that people from ethnic minorities have high representation. So that could be one factor why we are seeing more ethnic minorities maybe involved in union driving efforts as well. Maybe here in the UK at least, just because of the percentage of them being involved in unsecure work. But anyway, that's.
Oh no, it's all about the world that we're creating, right? Is anyone thinking about that? Right? Okay, fine. The PM Keir Starmer said that labor rights will be important, right? Obviously, he said that. So it's like, well, I haven't heard anyone saying that in a while in the top circles of power. Well, obvious reasons. But on the other hand, I would say that, it's important to think, what is the society we're creating? What are the people we're electing? And also, what kind of a society we want to live in? Because there's, it's easy to see rampant consumerism and like the celebration of inequality, like, wonderful influencers spending God knows how much money on God knows what things and flying God knows where in their private thingies. And then, obviously, and people are impressed by that. And this obviously creates a situation, I hate to say it trickles down, but creates a situation that, well, someone has to work for it. Someone has to be exploited to create that.
Exactly.
Sorry, that's how it works. And if we are getting impressed by it, we should also consider the other side of the coin.
And so just on that, so the result of that, and just going back to Amazon briefly, they spent, or they have spent to date, almost $14 million into what they call union busting consultants. So these are people advising them, to stop efforts for their workers to unionize.
I can only imagine violence being involved in such a consultancy gig. Sorry,
But more than that, it's like, what? Why couldn't you have spent that money in improving your workers' rights, and they would have gone? All this would have gone away. Perhaps.
Brilliant, Arif. Now you're getting to the point that I actually wanted to talk a bit about. Right? Okay. So I was actually thinking prior to this chat, how would I react if suddenly, in the organization I lead, I got news that a union is starting, and in fact, because what you just said, it's about collective bargaining. So. Essentially, I would be quite afraid. I'm not afraid to say that.
Yes.
That I would be terrified because suddenly a new power emerges.
That's right.
So there you go. Right. I had even if I was a benevolent dictator. Let's imagine that for once. This wonderful power that emerges, and we talked about power in the previous episode.
We did.
Well, it's just a natural human reaction to be afraid. It's like suddenly, oh my God, there's that. And they want to bargain. So it's a bit confrontational. I hope that I've given them enough rights and everything's great, but there's a reason why they're doing that. So I'll be honest, when thinking about that, it's difficult. So, I can only imagine that organizations react in this way. I don't condone it, but yeah.
And this is where the adversarial approach comes in. It's about that power dynamic, because there's a threatening feeling that, okay, I'm not going to have a say, or they'll more than that, actually, these unions are going to inhibit my ability to make changes, right? And I can't make decisions because they're going to overrule everything. Well, no, and I think this is the point. And the reading I've been doing, there's a lot out there about how you can work more collaboratively with unions to make sure there is, give and take, but there is a agreement or way of work you can get to, which works for both sides. It doesn't have to be adversarial like Amazon have been demonstrating, right? It's up to you as an employee, as a leader, to make a decision about, okay, these are the boundaries, these are the guardrails, this is where we can accept some input or say so in how things are decided on. Here we can't, and work it out, negotiate. Figure it out.
Negotiate and figure. Okay, so Arif, I'm going to be controversial. Where's my controversial button? What I wanted to say is boo-hoo, right? It is supposed to be confrontational, and I don't believe these articles. I believe it's just saying things to sound nice. What I will say is this. People form unions because you as a leader have done a very poor job and they feel exploited. I'm saying that out loud. It's your fault as a leader that they have to take this step. Don't think they're doing this not to be adversarial with you. They absolutely are, but it's your fault.
Yeah, well, now, so then the question is, are you going to be the adult in the room then? Are you going to then come to the table, have an adult conversation,
and reflect on the fact that you've done
exactly. Be reflective.
Certain job that I can't swear because I have to beep myself out. So. But that's what I want to say.
No, exactly. You're right. Be reflective. Consider what's happened for this to get to this point, and show some humility. Come to the negotiating table. And a good example of that.
Not that you have a choice. Well, you can hire the consultants.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at we've talked about the change of government until now, where we've had the Conservative government in power. An example of that has been doctors' strikes. So here in the UK, sadly, junior doctors, and that is a specific term. It doesn't mean they're young or whatever, but not for now. Junior doctors have been on and off strikes for at least a year, from what I understand, possibly even longer, around pay and conditions, right? The government of the day, in their infinite wisdom, decided that we're not going to negotiate, and we've already given you an offer, and it's a take it or leave it. The doctors obviously rejected that and said, we're going to strike until you come to the negotiating table. Never happened. They got booted out of power. We now have a Labour government. And first thing that the new Health Secretary said was, I'm going to be starting negotiations, opening up negotiations with the union, with the doctors, to ensure that this strike comes to an end as soon as possible. There you go. So it is possible. It's a choice. It's up to you to be the bigger person, so to speak, and realize that, in fact, I was reading some other research. Two professors from UC Berkeley and another from University of Michigan have written an academic paper 20 years ago, 2003, around do unions cause business failures, right? And so that is a belief which perhaps drives some of this behavior, right? You know, if I get unions, they're gonna cost me so much money.
Well, it's driven into me in business school, yeah.
Right, I'm going to have to increase pay and other benefits and all of that.
Yes,
and that's
you will.
Costly. They will. They may well increase all of that. But is it true that they will cause business failure? Surprise, surprise. The research they did identify that there's no evidence of that. There's no statistically enough evidence to determine that unionizing causes business failure.
It causes the exposure of leadership failure. It definitely causes that.
That's it. Yeah, it causes that. Right. On that fascinating point, let's pause for a break, and we'll come back shortly. Thank you very much. Are you looking for even more content from Humble Associates? Well, we've just the treat for you, as we'll be running our next live LinkedIn webinar on Tuesday, July the 16th, titled The Key to Innovation, Unlocking Your Leader's Potential. Joining us will be Will La, the founder of Kakapo Labs, a multifunctional tech incubator known for its creative approach to problem solving. At Kakapo Labs, Will and his team explore the boundaries between various forms of media, producing thought-provoking, innovative products. Their work marries digital technology with traditional and non-traditional applications, partnering with diverse individuals from business owners to artists. Don't miss out on practical tips and inspiring stories from Will and all of us at Humble, as you'll learn how to lead with innovation and drive success in your organization. To find out more, head over to our website, humble.associates, to register and join the webinar. See you there. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, we were discussing the merits of unions, whether they cause business failure, and the idea of negotiating being a choice and that kind of thing. So, TK, I made a couple of those points. I don't know if you wanted to react to any of that, but where do we go next with our conversation?
Well, I think you found some good examples of unions being collaborative and helping organizations, and being less adversarial. But I think the way I'm thinking about that is, a union is an important thing, but it's also a symptom. Right? It's not a disease, it's a symptom, and you need to preemptively react, not to have a situation where your labor force feels like they're being exploited and they need to take drastic action to do something about it. It's your responsibility as a leader to be preemptive. And I think, in terms of unions being collaborative, it's fine. I understand that, they may have happened and they're there, but I personally believe that it's a symptom of something bigger. So, that's maybe the point I'll make.
Thank you. On the point about collaboration,
yes.
there's a couple of things I wanted to bring up, and this is interesting. It's beyond the just thinking about unions as well. There are lots. There are ways that you can bring employees closer to the decision-making power.
That's quite interesting, obviously.
Yeah, where it doesn't necessarily have to be through unionizing. If that happens, and that exists in your organization, then it's
because
there.
Because as a leader, you've got there, yes.
Right. That's one aspect. But before I talk about that, another thing I was looking at, TK, there are, I remember we touched upon this in an earlier episode this season, where we talked about ESG as a topic, right? One of the things that consumers are big on now, and you see it through social media, for example, especially, is now if they perceive any kind of threat to worker rights at your company, your organization, they will call you out on it, and they will make your organization go viral for all the wrong reasons. So the pressure is even greater when it comes from an ESG point of view for you to treat your workers fairly and reasonably, and pay them well, for goodness sake. So I just wanted to mention that. And then to go back to what I was saying around other ways and means to increase the level of collaboration with your employees, get them closer to decision-making power. One of those is through what's known as ERGs, or employee resource groups, for example. That's one mechanism. We can talk about that. Another one is there are companies, for example, who have employee representatives on their boards, company boards. So there are that's a second one. Effectively, what these examples are demonstrating is, look, you have within your gift as a senior leader, as a decision maker in your organization, ways to reduce that communication gap, that power distance, increase collaboration, and increase engagement with your employee base if you bring them closer to what you're doing rather than keeping them at arm's length, which just exacerbates. I mean, I was having a conversation with I went to a meeting on Thursday. Was it? No, it was Tuesday. Tuesday. Sorry, a few days ago. It doesn't matter to our listeners, but a few days ago, I was at a meeting with someone who works as a head of talent and head of learning and development organization, and we were talking about some of this. And one of the challenges he's faced with right now is around the employee engagement being so low at his organization, partly because senior leaders, board especially, and the group CEO having a desire to keep information to themselves, and especially information that could have a direct impact on people's pay, promotion, bonus, all that kind of stuff. So financial information about the business, and it's causing so much consternation that people are now thinking about whether they want to stay at the company or not. So he's involved in those type of conversations because senior members, senior directors, and the group CEO are effectively not willing to communicate about what's happening at the business, at the organization, and keeping the cards close to their chest for whatever reason.
Well, I can only imagine it's not pretty, and they're not keeping a huge increase in profitability away from the employees. I'm just imagining, just guessing.
No, I know, but I think what I'm getting at, I suppose, the link I'm trying to make, PK, is, if you're going to maintain that power distance as a choice, and you're going to maintain this view that leaders are separate, or management is separate, or directorship is separate, everyone else are workers and are considered differently, perceived differently. I mean, it's no wonder you're going to get all these challenges to your power if you, as we described it before the break, when it comes to a union saying, no, we want to collectively bargain for our own rights here because we've had enough because you don't look after us. So this is all down to your, as an organization, your approach. So take heed of some of these other options. Think about, can you not place an employee representative on your board. If not, why not? What's stopping you? What's the worst that can happen? At the very least, you'll hear concerns from the employee base, directly rather than second or third hand through the hierarchy, right? Or create employee resource groups where, employees have a chance to have a say on matters that affect them. I was at another discussion a few weeks ago where the panelist was describing that they've created an employee resource group specifically around AI because they know that AI is a challenge that they're facing now, and it will have an impact down the line. Employees are worried about it. So they said, right, we'll go create this employee resource group. You as employees will have a say. You're going to be part of that. You're going to drive the conversation for our business and help us identify how we handle AI for us as a business. I thought, great, putting power back in the employee hands. I thought that's that kind of initiative is not difficult nowadays.
No, it's not. But there's more, I think, Arif, because what you're talking about, and the angle being taken here is motivating yourself with a bit of a stick, right? If you don't do that, bad things will happen, right? Put someone on the board, do all these wonderful things, start the BRG, because your employees will unionize and you'll be in trouble. But I think. Yeah. No,
fair enough. I'm not saying do that to stop union. I'm just saying do that anyway, whether or not you're unionizing. That's what I want to say.
Well, I think what's more important here is a different thing, which is like reflect on what is it that you can positively get through it, not what you're preventing, but what are the language of value, what are the options that you're enabling. That's one thing. Second, I think, which I think is quite an important point, it's all about, if you believe that power is what you seek and you have these beliefs that, you should ultimately be separate, that can become quite difficult. And again, Arif, I think another thing, to be able to do that, to be able to speak about workers' rights and workers' participation and labor, rights in this kind of positive language, what you need to do is you need to be preemptive. And we've been working with some clients actually about how many leaders are focused on the operational versus the strategic thinking and being proactive ahead. That's a good example of it, right? You don't feel the pressure of people really starting to, put their heads up until it's possibly too late for you and you've woken up in a bit of a mess. You need to be proactive. You need to create time and space for strategic thinking to be able to deal with things like that. And there is absolutely a lot of positivity in what Arif gave as examples and these things. But you don't motivate yourself just by running away from unions, but running towards the wonderful value that you're getting from that.
Yeah. There's a thank you. Good points, TK. There's also, as we're familiar with, TK, coming from putting our agile hat on for a moment. We rarely do it, but just putting it on for a moment. The
dusty.
Yeah, dust it off. Yeah. The original manifesto had a value statement, didn't it? Which was
that's quite dusty.
They're very dusty. There we go. I'm bringing it out because I think it's relevant. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Haha. Which is, I think this is what epitomizes our conversation today, TK. Right. Negotiating or working with a union, whether an existing or a new one that wants to be formed, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It can be about, okay, go in good faith, negotiate about how can we collaborate together so everyone gains something, right? And it's not about the finer details of the contract, whatever's said and not said, etc., but it's how we work together. I don't know. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yes, but
maybe simplistic. But I think that's
where's my disagreement button? I will say the following, Arif. I don't think the Agile Manifesto cares about much for workers' rights. In fact, I think it doesn't. I think it's a representative of a certain type of the world where, customer is the most important thing, right? You need to, and I'm not saying these are bad things.
I'm just being inspired.
I'm okay to negotiate and collaborate with people, but only through really challenging your own beliefs as leaders, challenging the consumer world, you will gain more empathy towards workers and workers' rights, not for reading the Agile Manifesto, sorry.
No, I get it. But I think just taking that principal view of collaboration is what I'm advocating for. And if you're a leader and you're involved, maybe you are involved in some union negotiations or you have regular contact with you, I'm certain where you go into that conversation open-minded about how do we collaborate better, how do we get the best for both parties, you get far more productive outcomes, right? If you're going in adversarially, you're not going to get what you're looking for. It's going to end up.
I'll add one more thing to the mindset of going into this conversation. Go with the conversation with maybe just a bit of thinking of, what have I done wrong? Why is it that these people actually now want to collectively bargain with me? Have I done everything okay? Have I been honest to these people?
No, you're right. And just rather than me just repeating things, as another example of how you can make this productive, again, in some of the reading I was doing, some unions, for example, they actually, work closely with the business to take on the responsibility of training union members. I thought that's an interesting, innovative approach there. It's like, okay, look, if you can guarantee our rights and all the rest of it, fine, we'll do the training. We'll make sure that our union members are, working to the expected standard and all the rest of it, and we'll provide that training for them. There's examples of that in some big businesses across the US and especially. But I thought that's an interesting, innovative way, right? Where you're trading off with each other to get benefit for both parties.
I love how you make it sound positive, and how you say, "Oh, such a great thing that they do training." Let me give you a different perspective on the same information. So how about I say the following thing? Your organization is so dysfunctional that it can't even train its own people. They have to unionize and do the training themselves.
I know
what the hell?
I know you have to be adversarial. Oh, sorry. I don't want to say that. Contradictory. I'm not seeing this as a... I think what you're saying or suggesting, TK, is the default position. Okay, yes, there is... Maybe I'm contradicting myself here. I might have said something different in the episode earlier in the episode. But that starting from the position of the mere fact that union needs to be created means there's something bad has happened. That's the position you're coming from. I can understand that. I hear what you're saying, but I'm just thinking: is that necessarily the case for in all situations? Maybe it isn't.
I'll give you something, right? Sometimes as the example you gave with the new government. Some unions and some problems have been created way before your time. And these unions and other groups are there. And I think you most certainly, in the status quo you have, can collaborate, negotiate, cohabitate, whatever, to make it an effective thing. Don't hire union busters.
Well, definitely don't do that. Yeah.
No, not the violent types. Not at all, actually.
I mean, yes. And as you mentioned, to get out kind of your learning originally at business school as well, wasn't it? Which is fascinating. So the world has definitely moved on from that. And as we've said in this episode, demands for unionizing are only growing for various reasons. And unlike you, TK, I think there are reasons beyond the organization's control where that is also happening. But yeah, I hear where you're
It's quite true, but also, to add a bit of a TK to the mix, I will say I don't think the world has changed that much. And I still believe that, in this the other business schools, same opinions are being exchanged.
Yeah, capitalism is still capitalism, isn't it? Greed is still greed, so they haven't gone away, unfortunately. So there we are. Okay.
You just changed space and colors and, TikToks and whatever.
Let's leave the conversation there. I think we've had a good chat today.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
about this topic. Fascinating as always, and thank you once again to our listeners for joining us. We hope you found this episode informative and you've learned something. If you have, then please don't forget to like or subscribe. And if you are a long-time listener and you've yet to leave a comment, please leave us a review because that always helps us with the algorithm. So. Thank you very much.
Our big exploitative thing, the algorithm.
Exactly. So, yeah. And with that, thank you very much for listening to us. And we hope to be back for our next episode very soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.